most Americans eat. The standard American diet, often called the SAD, or SAD diet. The SAD diet is sad. Sad that it's created an epidemic of heart attacks, strokes, and cancers, and a sickly, drug-dependent nation. We're eating ourselves to an early death in this country. And eating so much processed foods, sweets, and meats that it's making a nation of sickly and emotionally disturbed people. You see, Americans are eating predominantly processed foods and animal products. It seems unbelievable that over 55% of calories in the American diet is from sweets, processed grains, and oils. And if we remove the white potato, the total amount of fresh produce, like fruits and vegetables, is less than 6% of total calories. This is revealing, because Americans are eating mostly animal products and commercially prepared baked goods and oils. And that means about 95% of calories Americans eat do not contain those nutrients that protect against cancer, specifically antioxidants and phytochemicals. Most foods you're eating promote weight gain because they stimulate fat storage hormones. Instead of burning the calories for energy, these hormones make sure what you eat gets turned into fat. If you're like most Americans, the only time your weight goes down is when you're in an elevator. All right, the two primary fat storage hormones are insulin and insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1. Sugars, sweets, and white flour products raise insulin production, and insulin promotes cell growth and angiogenesis. I know some of you may have thought angiogenesis was the first book of the Bible, but it really means the growth of new blood vessels. So insulin promotes fat storage and the growth of blood vessels to supply the highways needed to bring glucose to fuel the growth of more fat. If you did not hormonally support angiogenesis, your body can't get fat. To make matters worse, the same foods that make you get fat promote cancer. A meta-analysis of 10 studies published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition on glycemic load and cancer demonstrated a dramatically heightened level of various cancers with those eating more sugar, white bread, white flour, and white rice. For example, a study published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition demonstrated that for every 400 calories of white rice added to the diet, breast cancer rates went up 20%. I say, the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead. Stay away from white flour, white sugar, white rice, white cigarettes, cocaine, heroin. Anything too white should make you nervous. But the most powerful inducer of cancer cell replication is excessive levels of IGF-1. It's called insulin-like growth factor because it's a hormone shaped like insulin, and it can bind to the insulin receptor and act like insulin. IGF-1 can powerfully promote growth, and that means growth of abnormal cells in cancer. And it promotes fat storage too. We know that it's mostly the processed foods in the American diet that promote excessive insulin, but it's the excessive amount of animal products in the American diet that promote dangerously high levels of IGF-1. Like turning on a spigot. When you increase the percentage of animal protein in a diet, IGF-1 is turned up accordingly. In this slide, reproduced from a study published in Aging Cell Journal, you can see low IGF-1 levels measured in vegans is below 150. And that is much lower even when compared to people restricting their calories in general, and the average American on the right with the highest levels. What we learned in elementary school about the value of high biological protein was upside down. Now we know that the lower biological value proteins in plants are more lifespan favorable and more than adequate for our body's needs for protein. Quite alarming is another huge investigation published in the journal Cell Metabolism. They followed thousands of people for 18 years in the 50 to 65 age range and found death rates went up 75%. And cancer rate climbed 400% in those eating what researchers called a high-protein diet. They considered the diet high in protein if it averaged 18% of calories from animal protein. But that's still less animal protein than most Americans are eating. This graph depicts the data in this study showing as a person's intake of animal protein increased, the risk of cancer and death went up accordingly. This means that if you eat 25 servings of animal products a week, such as meat, chicken, fish, cheese, or eggs, as most Americans do, you'll have a 400% increased risk of cancer and a 75% increased risk of dying prematurely, compared to someone eating animal products 5 servings a week or less. But there's another critical point I'm making, and that is some of the most popular diets, such as paleo diet or the Atkins or Dukan diet, are encouraging people to eat much more animal products, even more than twice as much as Americans generally eat. And that's twice as much as what these studies consider to be high protein. The increased risk of cancer from these popular high protein diets could be frighteningly higher, and certainly tremendous suffering and needless premature deaths is occurring because of this. And if you want to kill yourself as quick as possible, you can mix sweets in with the meats, pushing up insulin and IGF-1 simultaneously. Heightened levels of both those hormones are an important reason why Americans are so overweight and cancer-prone. Macaroni and cheese, a ham and cheese sandwich, meatballs and spaghetti, pizza, all these foods mix high glycemic carbohydrates together with the IGF-1 stimulating foods, creating a population burdened with life-destructive medical problems and food-induced deaths. That's why so many people think Darth Vader developed these common American foods. Okay, what you've learned so far is that the SAD diet is dangerous, and high-protein diets are dangerous. But I'm also going to show you why almost all other diets are dangerous too, and they don't even work. Scientific studies show that when you do lose weight on a diet, you're most likely going to gain it all back again, and then some. The amount of people that lose their excess body weight and keep it off for the rest of their lives is rare. Plus, when you go on a diet and lose weight and then gain it back again, you wind up worse off and at a higher risk of serious disease than if had you never lost the weight to begin with. The lipogenic enzymes, fat storage enzymes, are ramped up with caloric restriction. And after you lose some weight on a diet, those fat storage enzymes stay in an excited state for months, making weight regain occur quickly after you go off the diet. So if you go back to eating anything like you were before, you'll actually gain weight at an accelerated rate. And in most cases, even overshoot the weight you were before you began the diet. But there's another serious problem that develops. When you regain the weight that you lost, it deposits the fat somewhat differently. The fat is then stored more internally, in more dangerous places around your organs. You see, there are 2 types of fat on your body: subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. Subcutaneous fat is right under your skin. It's the fat you can pinch at your belly. But visceral fat is the fat behind the layer of abdominal muscle. You can't pinch it, as it's mixed in with your internal organs, deeper inside you. When you diet, you lose mostly subcutaneous fat. When you regain weight after dieting, you put back more visceral fat. So every time you go on one of those crazy diets, you increase the amount of visceral fat on your body, because it's visceral fat that makes you diabetic and is more cancer-promoting than the fat you had before you dieted. So if you want to get yourself closer to death, convert your subcutaneous fat to visceral fat by dieting and then gaining weight back again. When you yo-yo your weight up and down, it also increases your risk of heart disease because more fat is placed inside your blood vessels, too. That's why so many heart attacks occur on or right after holidays and vacations where people have gone off their diets and binged on food. So 4 things happen to your fat stores after you diet and then gain some weight back. Number 1, your stored fat becomes more visceral. Number 2, your stored fat becomes more saturated. Number 3, the blood vessels become more vulnerable. And number 4, you become more insulin resistant and diabetic prone. Here are 2 women, the same age and weight. Do you know which one is more likely to have developed pre-diabetes already and headed for diabetes in a few years? And the one at higher risk of heart attack and cancer? It's Jill, the nurse on the left, because she's gone and off lots of those high-protein diets in the past and has lost and regained weight 6 times, whereas Jane just stayed overweight the whole time. You're going to be amazed how easy it can be to turn this all around, how easy it can be to get to your best, healthiest weight and stay there forever and end dieting forever. Don't you want that?